This is my new G85 Panasonic Lumix camera. So I'm trying to film at the bench with the GoPro. So we'll see how that goes. This is the camera. I bought it as a kit with the body and with this kit lens. This is a micro 4/3 camera, which means it has a crop factor of 2. So this lens is a 12mm to 60mm zoom, which means that the field of view that it shows is equivalent if you had a full frame sensor camera or a 35mm film camera. It's equivalent to a 24mm to 120mm zoom. I think this is f3.8 to f5.6. This lens seems to do really well. It seems to give sharp results edge to edge. I haven't exhaustively tested, but it certainly produced good results. So why did I buy this camera? For a long time I've been thinking about buying a Canon 5D Mark IV, I guess they're up to now. Full frame camera. It's a wonderful camera. It's kind of dated now. The beauty of the full frame is that it does amazingly well in low light. You can shoot that camera out to probably 25,600 ISO and have fairly good results. Because of the size of the sensor, just the physics dictates that it gathers lights better than a smaller sensor would. So I started looking for a camera to do videos, to do these YouTube videos, and this G85 naturally came up. I didn't want to point and shoot. And I thought about buying that 5D, but the 5D doesn't do very good on video, and all the folks that do video said this G85 was a great camera. Panasonic makes a GH5, which is not quite $2,000, which is the premier video camera. And I don't want to spend $2,000 on it, but this one, this was $900 I think for the kit with the lens and the body, and it had, some cheapo throwaway accessories that came with it, but reasonably priced. So I started really looking at this thing, looking at reviews on YouTube, looking at stuff online. And there's a whole kind of bunch of professional photographers that have switched from full frame cameras to these micro 4/3 cameras. And the reason is because they're small and they're light. You can see this camera, it might be somewhat hard to tell based on this video, but this camera is a fairly small camera. It's quite compact. This camera is fully sealed. So it's sealed, it's splash proof, dust proof. You can take it outside in the rain and not worry about it. You can be out in dusty conditions and not worry about it. That's the 5D is that way also, but it used to be a camera under $1,000 was not sealed like that. So this is close to a professional quality camera. It has a 16 megapixel sensor, and it takes great shots. That's what I'm hearing online, and that's what I've seen from taking some sample photos. But I've been really pleased with it. It's light. So imagine this lens. Imagine a 24mm to 120mm zoom on a 35mm full frame camera. This lens would be at least twice this big. So it's incredibly nice and compact. This is the first lens that I bought for it. So this is a Panasonic lens. And this lens, let me get this hood off of it. This lens is a 35 to 100mm f2.8. So full frame equivalent, this is a 70 to 200mm f2.8 zoom. This lens, when you zoom it, it does not extend. It's parafocal so that the focus is constant as you zoom, which is important if you shoot video. So this lens, and it's stabilized, it does great. This lens is equivalent to the Canon L series 70 to 200mm f2.8 zoom. This lens is not cheap. It costs about $1,000, but that Canon L series lens costs upwards of $2,000 depending on the exact version you get. And I'm sure that L series lens is amazing, but that L series lens is at least twice as big as this. It's twice as long, probably, and it's 50% bigger, and I bet it weighs twice as much. So the point is, you can take this micro 4/3 stuff and put it in a much smaller bag. It's not nearly as heavy to carry around. The optical results that I'm seeing on this, and from what I read online, this is an excellent lens. It shows a little bit of softness at f2.8 and it's tack sharp by f4. And that little bit of softness, you have to zoom into the, you have to do the pixel peaking thing to actually even see it. So I'm really happy with this lens. This lens is great. So suddenly now, it's my belief that with this setup, I can get pictures that are every bit as good as the 5D Mark IV, as long as I'm not relying on high ISO performance. So as long as I have sufficient light. The other thing this camera does is it gives you, I think it's 4 stops because of its in-lens and in-body image stabilization. So even in low light, you can shoot at lower ISOs handheld with the image stabilization as long as your subject isn't moving. So for low light sports or something, the Canon is going to kick this one's ass. But I think that for everything else, this camera will be very close, if not equivalent, to that setup. And this camera is half the size, half the weight, half the cost. The videos that I've shot so far that I put on YouTube have been with this camera. This is a great video camera. I've taken, not a ton, but I've taken enough photos to kind of gauge the sharpness and the quality of the images coming out of this camera, and it's quite good. So I think this Micro Four Thirds stuff makes a lot of sense. It's got me excited about it. It's a third the price, really, even half the size, half the weight. As long as it's not low light, it does, I think, almost as good, if not equivalent, to the Canon 5D Mark IV. So that's my Micro Four Thirds setup. I'm going to show you some images now from the G85 and try to show you the quality of it. I don't know how well this is going to translate over YouTube, so it's not going to have the same resolution that I'm seeing, but I'm going to try to have some zoom in shots, and so that even with crappy YouTube resolution you can see sharpness and not sharpness and noise and things like that. This is a shot I took using the kit lens. You can see the details of the shot down there in the lower left. So this was at 23mm zoom, f5.2 at ISO 200. So you can see everything's quite sharp. This is a zoom pixel peaking at the center of the last image. And you can see the focus is good, everything is sharp. You can see a little bit of color noise. But this is a completely raw, unprocessed image, so no sharpening, no noise reduction, nothing. And even at 1:1 on my monitor, I can't really detect that noise. This is the same crop, not exactly, obviously, it shifted a bit, but I did some kind of normal processing in Lightroom and added some noise reduction, some sharpening, and you can see I still have really good focus and the color noise is gone. This is another image from the kit lens, and it's fairly high ISO, but the light was lower than you think, but image shows really good sharpness. Very pleased. This is an image taken with the 35 to 100mm zoom. It's zoomed all the way into 100mm. This image shows good sharpness. Also, this image, this is unprocessed, but when I process images like this, I'm very pleased with the dynamic range of this camera. When I highlight, when I boost the brightness of shadows, I don't see a lot of noise coming in. Again, for a small Micro Four Thirds sensor, I'm very pleased with the dynamic range. This last image I'm going to show you was shot in the house at night with the 35 to 100mm lens. This is at 100mm at f2.8 at 3200 ISO. It's just shutter speed of a 25th of a second. So a 25th of a second at an equivalent 200mm zoom is pretty amazing that it doesn't show any shake. If you zoom in, you can definitely see the noise. You can get rid of the noise with some noise reduction, but you definitely do lose some resolution on the fur of the dogs. But, as I say, this is the place where the full frame camera would far exceed the performance of this Micro Four Thirds. Having said that, I'm still pretty happy with the results. You can still get usable images at 3200 ISO. and the notion that you can hand hold this lens at a 25th of a second. I could probably go slower than that without showing any kind of vibration. The image stabilization of this camera and this lens are working really well. So that about does it. Thanks for watching. Appreciate it.